want to talk about the pain that men are feeling right now. And I want to, and not that I completely understand it. So Tay and I went to see my mom and my brother on Sunday. And on the way back, he was like, let's listen to something and let's find a podcast we both like. So I had never heard a Joe Rogan podcast. How can I put this? I saw in both of those men a childishness that was very poignant in a way. And I thought, you know what we don't talk about enough is what exactly are the steps that get you from childhood trauma to adult dysfunction. Welcome to It's Interesting You Say That. Each week, we dive into personal strength, mental resilience, and emotional balance. I'm Jennifer Dillon, a nonprofit leader and resilience expert, and Tyler is a professional coach. We come from different backgrounds and different generations. I'm a bleeding heart liberal. He voted for Trump. But each week, we have a deep, meaningful conversation about the world today. We're glad you're here. Like people will say, well, I had a bad childhood. And I bet I know for sure, I don't know enough about Joe Rogan, but I know for sure Elon Musk had a traumatic childhood. I wonder also if Joe Rogan did. And the steps that take you from that bad childhood to your adulthood and what are like the gears that turn that make things the way they are, I think we don't talk about. And I wanted to talk about.
I saw some of that podcast because I was interested. They've had, I think they've had, aside from some of the joking around, they've had a couple of decent conversations. But this one, I was, especially because of the election, I was really curious to see, what a 3-hour conversation with this guy would be like. And I don't know how long first 10, 20 minutes is them just joking around with the AI, childish joking around. Mm-hmm. They get in, like maybe I get 30 minutes in I kind of turned to my wife because we were watching it together. I'm like, I can't watch it. Like, I just can't watch it. It's I think there's a time and place for playfulness. I think, especially after going through, whatever traumatic things you go through in your life, it can be very, especially as a child, it can be very hard to bring those elements back into your life and integrate them in a way that's healthy and productive. But that conversation, it just wasn't for me. Mm-hmm. And it was almost, to me, it was disappointing.
I mean, I get it. It can be funny, that chat bot that was the Grok bot that, was like the woman who was, really obnoxious. I don't know how to describe what her intention was, but I could see how it gets funny. I'm not saying it wasn't funny. But when you have a guy on who is literally destroying people's lives by laying them off, I don't think, like that connection was just completely gone from the conversation. It was the goofiness about it. And it really just struck me as a mother of a teenager who and someone who grew up with brothers. I get that humor and the goofiness and it's funny and, the fart jokes and the whatever, right? Nothing wrong with that. But we are in a very serious time. And the point that I wanted to make was that we can track back our trauma to those kinds, to what they're experiencing, what they're going through. So here's what I see, like with Joe Rogan. I see a young guy, even though he's not young, he's probably like my age or maybe a little bit younger, who has experienced something in his past, and his desire now is to be loved and so he has found ways to make a lot of money. Yes. So it's very responsible on his part, but the way that he was kind of worshipful of Musk, like he listened to what he said. He was like, yeah, that's right. There was no kind of, well, let's question this and let's kind of dig into it. And I don't know, maybe he does that in other shows, but the part that's what I heard was very much like looking up to Musk and being very deferential and accepting of everything he said. So and then Musk, we could talk about it in a second, but let me just go back to what can happen in childhood. So let's say, I don't know anything about him, so I'm not going to say this happened to Joe Rogan. So I'm just going to make up a person, a character. So let's say that a kid grew up and They didn't have a father in the home. They were maybe neglected because mom was working all the time, and they maybe brought themselves up. Maybe their siblings and them kind of took care of each other. And there's just a feeling of neglect, a feeling of I miss not having a dad. These are very common things a lot of kids go through. And as he was growing up, realized that, well, I could get a lot of attention by, I guess he was a fighter, right? Like a UFC fighter, MMA fighter, something like that. And so, is that true? Is that he was a fighter?
I think he fought. I think he was an amateur fighter, but he got into acting, I want to say, and then he
Mm.
had his own reality. Do you remember Fear Factor? I don't know if you
Yeah,
do,
I don't watch it.
but
It's I'm not the demographic for Fear Factor, I don't think.
yeah. So he had a couple of shows, and then I think he did commentary for the UFC when it
Hmm.
was first starting. I think.
Okay.
I'm not super familiar, but at least I think that's roughly his background
So
or
he
professional background.
he sought a way to make money and to do the things that he was talented at. So on that surface level, his life makes sense. Everything. I mean, he's a successful person. But let me say what happens when you do feel neglected. So these are called adverse childhood experiences. Adverse childhood experiences is a study that was started by Kaiser in the 90s, like late 80s, I think, into the 90s, and is ongoing. And what they discovered was that kids who grow up in a household where they're abused in any way, where they're neglected, where there is household dysfunction, like missing a parent, um, through divorce or incarceration, when there is violence in their community, and not all of those things have to happen at once. You need to have even just one of them. And then it's dose specific. In other words, you could have one thing happen and it could affect you. You could also have it happen over and over and over. So what happens when you're little? Your brain is developing, and your brain is looking for ways to keep you safe. We talk about this all the time, that what we do is our brains and our bodies are constantly trying to keep us alive. So the brain starts to recognize that I'm vulnerable. Neglect just means I know in my heart, children know I can't take care of myself. I am completely dependent on this person. And that person may be the person who's neglecting them or abusing them, but they need them, right? So they have to devise ways in order to get the attention they need or to protect themselves from the abuse. And their brain will then develop their fear center so that it becomes hypersensitive to what could be going on, what's around the next corner. And literally it changes what they call the architecture of the brain. The brain now becomes much more hypervigilant to, I'm going to be hurt. I'm going to be neglected. I'm going to be left behind. I'm going to be laughed at. I'm going to be abused and hurt somehow. And so we develop, and this happens to many, 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 many people. I'm not talking about Joe Rogan specifically. I'm not talking about boys and men specifically. This happens to all of us. And then what happens is we try to adapt to that. So we find ways to feel fulfilled. Okay. So now you've got someone who maybe recognizes that they can fight. So they go and they find a career in fighting, or they find that they're funny. Like, I think he used to be a comedian. So you go and you do your work. So a lot of comedians, if you talk to them, they will, great comedians have actually said this. I couldn't do comedy if it weren't for my trauma. My past trauma gave me the impetus to do comedy because it got me attention. It gave me the audience laughing felt like love. When they're very much in touch with what they're doing and why they're doing it, they recognize they're doing it for love, right? So now you have an adult who is still operating on that need to fulfill themselves, to feel that they have love coming from their comedy or whatever it is. And then it gets dysfunctional. You're a man. Tell me if what I'm saying makes sense, and if you can recognize what that dysfunction looks like, if you think that I'm kind of on the right path.
I see. Maybe well, for men, the concept that love is earned
Mm,
and where it might become dysfunction. And I think too, I think that's partly true.
mhm.
I think for men, love is earned. And I don't think that has to be bad. I think that can actually be a great thing. I think it actually can inspire a lot of people or a lot of men to 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 earn something, to earn love, whether that's, you earn your, not saying like you earn your wife, but like I definitely earn my wife's love. I
How
think
do you
I
do
earn
that?
my kid. I don't know. I have to be a real person with her. I can't, I can come online and I can say, oh, here's what I learned, and here's my wisdom, here's my experience. Use this, but with her, she sees how I'm getting to those things.
Yeah.
She sees who I actually am. She sees my struggle, and I have to be someone who can kind of get over those struggles and still be there for her with her needs, and still be there for the children with theirs. But also be a person who can allow them to be there for me as well. And I think in that way, the relationship is somewhat. I mean, I guess I have my own conditions on her too, and so in a way, like she also earns my love. Like you forget that, like the feeling of love or that positive satisfaction when people respect what you do or they appreciate what you do or they love you is separated from who you actually are and your relationship with the actual people. It's kind of like you're just getting that like a drip feed of dopamine, and you're kind of living in a fake world where you're kind of fabricating the sense of good feeling, when in reality you kind of you actually have to be there with people and be in an actual relationship, whether that's just with your wife or your kids or with an audience. You actually have to be there, and I think when you become separated, that's when um you start to use other metrics like fame or respect or money as a replacement for actual connection.
I mean, what you described with your wife is she wants the real you. So what you're doing is she is challenging you to dig in and show her your true self, right? Which is very loving, which is a very beautiful thing. That's true love to me. She's not asking you to now the inauthentic side would be that you got to earn my love because you're bringing home money. You look good on my arm. You're um you have a certain power position, that makes me look good, right? And that is, you can see that in our popular culture, how many relationships are put out there as being true love, which are very transactional. You're beautiful and hot, and I got the money. So I'm the old bald guy with the money, and you're the beautiful hot woman. That's a transaction. I don't know. People can have real relationships and have that kind of difference in their what it looks like. So there's a that kind of pattern or archetype of the powerful man earns the love of the beautiful woman, and that gets substituted for true love. And I would say this, when you said that they have to, like, you have to earn the love, there's an even deeper message there, which is, why are we not accepting that we are intrinsically lovable? And I think a lot of men never feel that in their entire life, that I am, just as I am, 100% lovable. That's hard to do. And it's hard for women too. It's not, it's just, as human beings, we don't accept that in ourselves.
Even just hearing, it's funny, doing the type of content that I do, and knowing, like, even just like hearing that is still difficult. It is still difficult for me to hear.
Why?
Bec- because and I don't know if this can be separated from like a man woman thing, or if it's just a trauma thing, or if it's just me. I'm sure other people feel it, but it's just it's kind of like I believe that wholeheartedly from an inward perspective. I am lovable. I love myself. I'm worthy of respect. I should treat myself well. I'm not sure if this is exacerbated for men, um, but my external experience has not been that. Outside of, I guess, like outside of my mom and
Mm-hmm.
like to my wife to some extent. I think there have been women in my life who have, but even then, I guess there hasn't been. For my mom, for example, like I'm her son. I'm the greatest thing since
Mm-hmm.
sliced bread. Um, she's a huge reason. I think why that I've been able to have some sort of confidence given the things that I've been through. But even then, when I look at the relationship, like there are, and if my mom happens to watch this, I love you, and I'm willing to have a much deeper conversation. But there are external motives, like you want your son to do well, or
Mm-hmm.
you want your son to be around. I ended up giving both my parents a lot of emotional support as a kid, and
Mm-hmm.
so when I did those things, they love me. I'm their kid. But when I do a couple of certain things, I'm loved more. I'm treated a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's the same thing with my wife too. Like she loves me for me, of course. Well, I tend to cook dinner or clean the house, or I'm playing with the kids, and suddenly I'm looking a little bit better. Same thing with content or with work. I can be out, well, and that's a lot more harsh. I think when the relationships get further from core relationships, it gets much more harsh, where like who are you? What do you do? What do you offer? What's your value? Like, what are
Mm-hmm.
you doing for me? How
Mm-hmm.
can you help me make more money? How can you help me live better? How can you help me do something?
Mm-hmm.
And y- and I know this might not sound healthy, but I feel like that's a truth. And the sooner that you realize that, like, nobody owes you anything. Like, you kind of have to earn the respect of people. You have to earn love. You have to, and maybe not in the sense of like, you have to make money to be loved, but like there is a certain like energy exchange in every relationship that you have. And if you bring a low, if you're low vibrational, I'll say, or you have a low energy exchange, or you draw from people more than you give to people, or or at least if it's not equal, I think man or woman, nobody's going to want to really be around you.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it gets twisted in the fact like, oh, but that means I have to make money. That means I have to have a hot girlfriend. That means I have to have a great job. That means that, and it doesn't mean any of that. It just might mean like you have to like care about people when you talk to them, or like listen, or you like, what do you have to offer? Like, be the best version of yourself with anybody, and you'll have that love because people will just want to be around you.
Yeah. Okay. So let's look at it this way, that let's say you have two columns, and in one column is somebody who knows they are lovable at some level. I mean, and we all struggle with this. That's, it's very hard to find someone who, like, I am 100% lovable without them being a little bit delusional, right? So that you are a human being on the planet, you are, a child of God, or however you think of it. I am lovable. And then you go out and you do the things that you do. You say, I have a lot of talents. I want to share them. I have motivation and desire and ambition that I want to succeed in certain things. I want to leave the world a better place, right? So you can do all those things from the place that says, I'm lovable. Now you can do the same things from the place that says, I'm not lovable. I am not special. I have to try to find a way to make people see me and convince me of my love. So if I have a lot of money, if I have a hot girlfriend, if I, or boyfriend, or I mean, I think this is for both. This is not a male only thing. I think it just shows up a lot in men because there's a lot of outward stuff that they're doing in the world that we can see. Um, yeah. So that place of not feeling loved, if you start from there, that's where the dysfunction happens. And what does the dysfunction look like? So if you feel, and you feel you're somebody I think feels pretty secure in your lovability, and you may be on a spectrum of like, I feel 75% there, I'm not 100% there, that's fine. But you come from that place. So when you do things with certain intentions and motivations. For somebody who comes from the other side where they feel like I am not lovable, and these are deep things that don't even come up in words, they just are just bad feelings, all around. This is what leads to dysfunctions like narcissism, for example. So people think that a narcissist is just, the outward thing where they're trying to get you. They're trying to get at you and take what you have and make you do things for them and control you. The reason they do that is because they have such a deficit inside. They don't have a sense of who they are. They don't have a sense of their lovability. So they misinterpret power over other people, the ability to manipulate other people and get attention from other people as what it must feel like to be loved. And when they don't feel that, then they don't feel lovable. And that can then become extremely amplified, where you have narcissists, for example, that lead cults where they have to have people worship them, or they become presidents, they become dictators. They use that deep, deep hole in them to motivate them towards love, but they misinterpret what it means. And that brings me back to the Rogan Musk, podcast that I listened to, where I saw two little boys with a lot of deficit exhibiting a lot of these kinds of behaviors that felt very, number one, inauthentic to me. And number two, very destructive. That there was this kind of like, pretense that they were, the guys in charge, when actually they are both desperately seeking some kind of recognition, approval, or evidence that they are important, and then importance equals love. I don't think either one of them understands. I don't know about Joe Rogan, but I can see that definitely in Musk, understands how to truly fix that hole in them that I feel I can see. And that's very disturbing, because we tend to, mistake that second row, that ambition for power and all that, for leadership. And then we go after it, right? And we give it a lot of power. We give them a lot of power. And I think there's a lot of people who are suffering like that don't have that kind of power, but they want to feel special. And what are the ways that we can feel special now? And so I want to kind of dial it back and say, how do we talk to a young person who, for example, really, really wants to have a child, because it might make them feel special to be an adult, to be a parent, right? So they have a child that's 17, 18, 19, 20 years old, and they're not ready. And, they have a baby mama or baby daddy, and they're trying to make it, and they're still trying to fill that hole where they need to be loved, and they want to be loved by the other person, or they want to be loved by the child, or they want society to see them as lovable because they're a parent. You see how it can get really, I don't know if I'm explaining this well, but how it can get really distorted in a way that makes a lot of pain kind of continue generation to generation.
As a mom, what's your greatest fear for your son? Like, just with how things are and like these examples of men that we have.
That he will not understand that I love him, that he is lovable, whether he cleans his room or not, whether he gets straight A's or not. Like my love for him is not performative. He doesn't have to do anything but be himself. And even if he's not himself, because he's trying out different, I don't know if I feel like this, or I don't know if I'm going to go over here, or what my work is going to be, or whatever, that none of that matters, that he is intrinsically lovable. And people don't believe that, because what, just being me is lovable? They don't believe it. And I don't know how to convince him of that, because he lives in the world where he thinks that, all the things that people think.
I think you're hitting on something that I'm currently struggling through this, where I think like your mom loves you, or like your wife loves you. And you might have like these people in your life that do, and maybe you have a dad and maybe he loves you. But like, if I don't clean my room, like, yeah, okay, mom, you still love me. Great. but like I still can't go get the girl at school because
Mhm.
because I'm cleaning my room. And I think it's like this weird, like the internal says, yes, you are loved, or like someone in your life is saying like, yes, you're loved, but there's some sort of like external that's not matching up to that. And so it almost feels like
Yeah.
it almost feels like a lie. Like, okay, like, yeah, I'm lovable. And so where's my job? Or like,
Mhm.
so why can't I get hired?
Right.
Or why is this not happening? And I know at least for me, like my dad was around. I think to be honest, he probably could have spent a little bit more time. I think he was stuck in that cycle.
Mm.
Like to him, like success, money, career, status, that was his thing. And so even to this day, hey, love you, dad, if you're watching this one too. But like that's how he's built. That's how he functions. He actually he has a very difficult time connecting emotionally because his whole thing is kind of built off like career or money or like what I can provide. The very traditional provider protector.
Yeah.
And that's his whole thing. And for a while, that was kind of my thing. And then I kind of balanced it out. Like, okay, yeah, like I think once I learned like I can provide, I can protect, I can do these things, I can be valuable in a marketplace, I can be valuable in the dating area. Like I can have a wife, I can have kids, they can value me just for me because I'm funny or I play. And I was like, okay, like I don't need to chase these things. I don't need to go to the extreme. But I think one thing maybe about my childhood that kind of led me there was, and something that I'm dealing with very much now is like a male role model, like a male or a
Mhm.
man that embodies that,
Mhm.
because it is very I have not found a male role model other than maybe like on YouTube, like once in
Yeah.
a while, and like far and few in between, where and you never and that's the problem because in on YouTube you can't really tell. On
Yeah.
content you can't really tell. But to the best of my knowledge, I've always been searching for this like a male example of how you embody that love, but also accomplishment and in a way that doesn't get distorted. And so I kind of found myself like looking at these podcasts, looking at these people on YouTube and feeling, okay, like are you the role model? Like, is this the right way to do it?
Mhm.
Is this the right way? Until I finally just kind of got in, before we started this podcast, I was telling you about, how I've been meditating all week. And this is what I've been meditating on, trying to find out like what I'm supposed to do
Mhm.
without anybody to really give me that example. And it's been really disappointing trying to jump from thing to thing. Like, what's the example? What's the thing? What's the way? And my conclusion, at least up until now, is like there really isn't. Maybe you're lucky enough to come across a few people in your life that give you some pointers and give you some direction, but you still have to take that and apply that. So if I was to give myself, some advice about, being loved or unlovable or, you know, trying to replace that with success, it's not really about any of that. It's really just about what you want out of life and like what's one, maybe like what's the most efficient way to get that. And not so much efficiency as like, you have to be productive and you have to be efficient, but just like what's going to give you the best results of what you actually want and what's really true to you without like having to go make $1 billion and be cutthroat in business and go through and burn a whole bunch of relationships and treat yourself poorly. Like if you can just be clear on what you want and connect yourself with people that might have some information, take some stuff from this, take some stuff from that, and just kind of piecemeal your own thing together, then like you should be all right. But you definitely can't just like try to copy and paste someone else's perspective, especially like a Joe Rogan or an Elon Musk or a Trump. Like maybe they have some things that you want, but you have to distill that into like maybe that's an example, but like you can't copy and paste it. It's not going to work exactly right for you.
Tell me how you feel about this. I feel like I know I have this, and I think most of us do. We want to feel special. So I can say to myself, I'm lovable. And then why? Why am I lovable? Am I the smartest, the prettiest, the tallest, the most athletic, the most, that makes the most money, the savviest, sing the best, or whatever it is? We want to be special in some way. And we do that collectively, like, and unfortunately, I think a lot of our negative human aspects come from that desire to be special. I'm special because I'm American. I'm special because I'm white, or I'm, you can think of all the things. I'm, the tallest, or I come from this country, or I come, whatever. So we create really negative things out of the desire to stand out and be special. I mean, there's whole religions that are based on, so many religions are based on, you're this religion that makes you extra special in the whole, human existence because you pick this religion and your God is the special God and the one. And all of that's such a deep, deep desire that we have. And it's hard to shake that. So how do you fulfill that need to be special to yourself, even, much less to the rest of the world, which is what you're kind of talking about. And ha- it's part of who you are is displaying your specialness, because like you said, like your dad made himself special by being somebody who focused really on success and, outward stuff and making money and things like that. That's part of his personality, is part of who he is. That's how he expresses his humanity himself, his personality, his character. So where does that go dysfunctional is the question. And how can we be lovable humans, operating, and also special, and then not get all off into the, well, yeah, I wanted to chase money, so I didn't get to spend a long time with my son, or I wanted power, but I did it for negative reasons so I could hurt people, and control them.
I don't have I have my answer for
Hmm.
me. It's my family. I know that's it. I'm not sure if I'm not sure if this is healthy. I'm not sure, you'd go to the therapist and they'd say that's what you should do. But my family makes me feel special.
Hmm.
Um, like my family makes me feel special. The content that I make and the comments that I get sometimes make me feel special. But I don't think I'd be able to hear it or understand, or like to be able to really accept it. The reason I don't chase more, or like let me go have another family, or like let me have more kids so I feel even more special, or let me go like get more followers, or more money, is just because at a certain point in trying to chase that, I realized like, oh, like I'm a person that can actually do these things. It wasn't these things that I was chasing all along. It was just my own internal validation of being someone that I actually want to be. And then once I got to that point, I had to realize like, oh, and if I keep chasing these things, I will turn into someone I don't want to be. So there's kind of like this sweet spot where like I do have to push, I do have to try to like get some sort of external validation, but like it has to be matched with some sort of internal validation. And the more at least for me, the more I try to push for that external validation, the more I become out of sync with the internal validation, which just makes me just unhappy.
I think you're hitting the nail on the head in terms of how I'm looking at it, which is the reason I feel lovable. The times when I accept my own lovability is when I'm loving somebody else. So the difference between chasing after something because you want the world to see you as lovable, and it's these external things like money and power and the hot girl on your arm or whatever it is, the nice car, whatever. You're trying to convince people that you're lovable. But that internal sense of lovability comes from doing things that are loving to other people. That is actually what love is that is we wake up to that feeling of love comes from giving it. And then we accept that we are lovable because we're able to give love. And then it's an authentic exchange. And then you don't have to keep chasing it. You just keep giving it away, like the what is it? Jesus, who keeps, giving the fish away, and it never ends. Right. That's what love is. You keep giving it away, and there's this unending well. But when you seek inauthentic recognition for whether you're lovable, it's never enough. There's never enough power. There's never enough money. There's never enough women. There's never enough kids. There's never enough whatever it is. And I think that's something we should all look at.
It's like you said, it's not real. When you're doing it, it's real. It's a very even exchange of what you're giving and what you're receiving. But if you're giving out inauthenticity, you're just going to be receiving inauthenticity, and it just further reinforces that you're not enough.
Yeah, that's right.
Because someone's telling you they love you, but it's because that you're giving them money, or it's because you did this thing. And so that that, well, you very literally know, like, okay, well, this was a transaction, not love.
Yeah.
But you keep trying to use that same pathway to obtain something that's just not on that pathway.
Yeah. Well, let's, look at something like unrequited love. Like, let's say you love somebody and they don't show you the love back. You love your parent, you love the girlfriend, boyfriend, and they just don't love you back. That, of course, makes you feel immediately unlovable. There's something wrong with me. I'm not lovable. And I would argue that a lot of times we seek out when we have that feeling of unlovability. I know I did this when I was younger, didn't feel lovable, sought out the most difficult person that I could ever be with because they also didn't believe they're lovable and completely unable to have a real relationship with themselves or anybody else. But I sought them out because it felt like a challenge. If I could make them love me, then it would prove that my power of love was so intense that they then saw that they were lovable and they could love, and we would have this happy, ever after. But all you do is you hit upon each other's, dysfunctions, and lack of self-love. And that is, I think, something that happens for a lot of people. We try to prove that we're lovable by, finding relationships that are impossible and will never work. And that's not really love. So the big kind of moment for me was realizing that the relationships that I had that were like that, because there was more than one that I did over the course of my life, that those relationships actually, I could let them go and I could feel good about them because I did have moments of truly loving the other person, truly trying to give them the things that they needed in their life. And that to me was a path towards my own self-love. Even though it didn't work out, I recognized, look, I can love, I can give in situations where I don't get anything back. I can feel good about somebody just uh, experiencing what it feels like to have, to be seen and heard for who they are, the real. And always there was a little boy in there just crying out for, I need to be loved. My mom didn't love me. My mom, one of the one of the men I was with had his mother left when he was 13. He just never got over it. When your mom walks out the door and you never see her again, it's a tragedy. How could he feel that he loved himself? Right. I hope he's not listening to this. Well, actually, I do hope, because I think he didn't recognize how painful that was for him and how it caused him to be very dysfunctional and break a lot of hearts. And I think men and women, young people, I hope that they see that so that they don't go, knocking their hearts against a brick wall forever and ever. But also finding that peace inside that you can give of yourself, be loving, but also recognize that other people can't give it back, and that's okay.
Just to maybe touch back, what you said about, that person whose mom walked out. I think but my relationship with my parents and how they've chosen to move through their own traumas is, I guess, something that I respect, because even though they both kind of coped with it in their own way, not always the best, I think at the end, what I've learned, so my dad kind of with the, his career and everything, like we still hang around him. Like we still love him. My mom, she can be truthful to a fault. Um, and with, young kids, that can be difficult. She can be very sharp. But I used to feel, I don't know, like this void. And I think I've just recently kind of got over this void of like, some people have something to give, and nothing is exactly wrong or right if the relationship can still work and function. in a way that's not as hurtful. Like I consciously want to continue to offer these things in maybe a more healthier way because I value the relationship and I want to keep it because I still love them. They still love me. Maybe everything that happened wasn't the best and it wasn't the healthiest. But like how do you start to draw lines? I think maybe a lot of people who have been through trauma, it's very difficult to kind of draw that line. Like what's like how do I do this out of love? And then like when do I know if I'm just doing this out of trauma?
Hmm.
And then but also maybe a more nuanced question is like, I don't want to say like what's right or wrong, but like how do you like even if the things that you ended up learning out of trauma or doing out of trauma, like how do you they're still it's still who you are, it's still skills that you learned, or still your way how to love. Like how do you drop the baggage? How do you drop the negative stuff and continue to do that with a sense of like I'm not doing this out of trauma. I'm just doing this because this is who I am and this is how I love.
Yeah. That's a great question. I think that that's a big, big issue a lot of people have is I love that person, but they are harmful to me. They get on my nerves or they have hurt me in the past and they haven't recognized it. They haven't done anything to make amends for it. They haven't even apologized for it. I mean, there's all these things where it's like I can love, and the parents are the hard ones, right? Because they can do so much damage. There's so much potential for all of us to have had extreme adversity that was done, purposefully in terrible abuse, which some people have suffered from, and physical, mental, emotional, sexual neglect, which a lot of people experienced. And you can be loving enough to say, my parents like what you're doing, which is recognizing. I know that I've had that moment too, where at some point, I think it was like 33, 34 years old, and I didn't have any kids or anything. And I recognized one day, I am the same age that my mom was when she had 4 children. And how insane is that? Because I couldn't even handle myself, much less children and everything. And I gained a sense of understanding and empathy for her. So you can do that as a loving person. But I also learned you have to put up boundaries. And you do the boundaries not just because you love yourself, but because you love the other person and you will not support their dysfunction. And parsing out what is that person's dysfunction that you don't want to support anymore is difficult. It takes time. It takes a lot of thinking about things. So their dysfunction is affecting me. So this is where I put my boundary up. It doesn't mean I don't love them, but it does mean that I love them enough to not support that dysfunction.
So what would you say to a kid that kind of grows up in an environment that might not be the healthiest, might, kind of extreme to maybe, just not healthy, just probably not the best one, where kind of coming back to maybe men specifically, how to kind of find that inner voice or find or learning to trust an inner voice that has kind of been muted almost. And you have to kind of start forming that trust and maybe kind of forming that love with yourself, that bond. Like how do you start? And
Yeah.
is it different for men and women, do you think?
I don't think so. I think that obviously there are some different ways that women can show their dysfunction in terms of how they feel about themselves. And I've gone through this where maybe you're overly promiscuous, or you're wanting to have a lot of babies without kind of thinking through how they're going to be cared for, or you're become, very closed in on I live in my little world with my books and my pets, which is like me right now. I have like my 2 dogs and my 2 cats, and all I want to do is just be alone and read and things like that. So that there's lots of different ways. And one of the things that's been really helpful for me is understanding some of the archetypes around that, because then you can kind of classify yourself. You start with that. And I think that's why we look to like astrology and tarot and all these kind of things that like, who am I? Or or personality tests, which, by the way, I want to say, if you go onto our website, bbgtv.org, we have a whole bunch of personality tests that you can use that come from this organization in Florida that we partner with called Talent Transformation. And they're all free. I'm not selling anything. It's just, but there's some really great personality tests, and they take a while and they're very deep. What are your values? What is your personality type? What are your talents? Things like that. And I think all of those things are really helpful. I think for me, the tarot card readings are very helpful to just kind of start to look into who is the empress in my life? Is that me? Is that somebody else? Things like that. And because otherwise you're kind of swimming in the ocean by yourself, and the ocean's huge. So we need something that we can kind of grab onto. There's a really great book that I read years ago called Women Who Run with the Wolves. And it's all about these different archetypes that women have a lot of them have been forgotten because we live in a more patriarchal society, and maybe that's changing and we're becoming more women focused. But these archetypes are things like, one of the ones that I really kind of understood in a deep way was the archetype of the hag. So the hag is the old woman, with the hair on her chin and crone, and, like the kind of witchy, and everyone's afraid of her, but she carries with her all of this wisdom and depth and a little bit of magic, about how she sees the world. And it takes being old, for example, and puts it in a different perspective. There's the siren, which is the one who calls the ships into danger, right? There's the whole Odyssey, Homer's Odyssey, and that's the woman that's able to kind of get men to come over here, and I'm going to give you everything you want. And then they're in danger, right? That's the gold digger or something, right? So there's ways that then you can identify with certain characteristics that these archetypes have and start to understand yourself better. Not that you become those archetypes, but that those archetypes start to say, oh, I feel something there. I feel like there's a connection there. And then you must meditate. I'm going to say this over and over, and you don't have to. When I say you must, but I say if you really want to discover what is going on inside you, meditation is the only way I know how to do it. Now, some people they want to do shortcuts and they want to go do ayahuasca and psychedelics and all that. And you could do that. I'm not advocating for it. I think that it is the tech bro-y, cheap way, the social media influencer, the pop culture way of instant enlightenment. I'm going to go to some village and some shaman's going to just tell me exactly who God is. And then you're not going to get there. But let me tell you what happens when I meditate, and hopefully this helps people to understand why I advocate for it so much. So first you start meditating, and jump in if this is what happens for you, because I know you've been doing it a lot lately. You start to meditate, and voice comes in, oh, don't forget to turn on the dishwasher before you and it fades out. And then you hear, oh, my kid's running around in the background. And then you hear Pink Pony Club, and the song, that song has been in my head. And then, and so all these things happen. And then what you do is you notice it. And you say, oh, that's that song. And there's my kid running around. And then you push it out of your way. And when you get really good at meditating, you're able to just keep pushing things out of the way because they'll keep coming up. Okay. And then something will, boom, pop up in your head. And you'll say, what the hell is this? And literally you will be, I have literally all of a sudden been standing on top of a mountain with the sun shining on me, and it's clear as day for a split second. Or all of a sudden, all I see is one color, and what you start to realize is that there's all this stuff in my mind that I am not familiar with, but it is clear and crisp and new and different, and it's all in there. However, you also recognize none of those things are me. Those are all things that just come at me. And I choose then what I feel like I want to focus on. And that me being the observer and the chooser is who I really am. And then when you say you are lovable, you recognize I get it now. I am lovable because there's this whole mysterious, incredible thing that I am that I don't even understand. There's this hugeness about me. And all I get is my day to day. Like, did I go to the grocery store and, I need to mop the floor today. And I got to pick up the kid at 3:00. And all of those things are not me. I am a mysterious, deep entity that I don't even understand. That's how big I am. So of course I'm lovable. Of course, because as I get to know myself, I see all of this in me, and the love then can flow out to other people and to yourself.
I think that's very hard. Kind of maybe coming around to the start of the conversation, I think that's hard for men to maybe not logically understand, but to embody.
Why?
I think partly society. I think partly it's just not a sexy message for men. And I think partly a lack of, I think also kind of in conjunction with society, maybe just like the lack of like decent male role models, like men having to be outside of the home to work, and just not being around the kids that much. And I think especially like for boys, just not seeing how like you can accomplish something and still be something, be lovable and still earn, like kind of like the duality and like just a healthy role model for how it's like actually done. Whereas like you can see your mom and be like, oh, like that's how mom does it. Um, and like honestly, I probably inherited a lot more of my character traits probably from my mom, but I think still maybe biologically or just seeing that example, I notice within myself, within my dad, within my son, just like this, and even like my clients, like I tend to get on a call with a man, and like that's one, like it's one call, and like that's probably the only call
Mhm.
we're ever gonna do.
Mhm.
He had to know something so bad, he finally got on the call with someone to talk about it, and then okay, I got the knowledge, let me go run with it, I'm gone.
I just named a bunch of archetypes that are female oriented archetypes, which men can follow too. And there are male archetypes that women can follow too. So let's name some archetypes. You have the emperor. What is the value of an emperor? The emperor can organize people, can do things so that everyone gets fed. The villages are recognized. The walls are built to protect the humanity, right? That lives in this world. There's the knight, a knight that goes, like in tarot, there are these knights, and the knights represent, action. And, you can have a sword. So you can be the knight of truth. You're out there exposing the truth. And then maybe you're a scientist or something. Or you can be a knight with a cup, and a cup represents love. You're out there and you're making the world safe for, people to love. So maybe you're, teaching about love and how to have a happy marriage. There are lots of, there's David and Goliath. You protect the person being bullied. You fight the bully. So there are lots of male archetypes that can be followed that are positive and empowering and invigorating for someone who wants to follow, male or female. Follow those and say, that's how I express my love. And there's negative archetypes too, that do the opposite. There's a negative archetype of being the bully and always, crashing their way through everything and, taking what they want. And you can follow that if you want to, but where are you going to find the peace and the lasting value in something? Look for archetypes that do that for you.
So I know we're probably going a bit longer than we usually do on the podcast, but do you mind if I ask you just like a couple more questions?
No, yeah, absolutely.
So I've noticed, and I don't know, I'm starting to believe, well, I think I've always believed, but I think I'm starting to maybe experience like real differences between men and women. And I don't think it's black and white. I think there's a spectrum, but I do think there's a spectrum.
Hmm.
And for people that kind of tend to be more on the woman side or more on the man or masculine, feminine, whatever you want to call it, I do think maybe the approach is a little bit different, because I can even see like me and my wife, or like me, like my son and my daughter, like he is just all like figure it out himself. Like won't listen until like it's until he's had the lesson 20 times, and then
Hmm.
finally like you'll remind him, he'll be like, okay, but only because he's already gone through it all. He's already gone on the adventure himself.
Yeah.
Whereas my daughter, she'd be like,
Hmm.
okay, dad, okay, mom, like, okay, she'll just listen.
Hmm.
And it's so, not to say like all women listen and all men are hard headed.
Yeah, I get
Um,
your point though. Yeah.
but and I'm the same, like I'm the same way. I'm kind of hard headed. I have to go on the adventure. I have to go experience it. I have to go, fight the dragon. I have to go fight the demons. I have to go off and be alone and then come back. Whereas my wife can kind of just be like, okay, like that's the issue, that's the problem, and she's like embodying some sort of just like steadfast presence that is just able to deal with the challenge without having to go climb a mountain to do it.
Hmm.
Um, and like I don't know, do you notice that? And like so I and maybe more specifically, like for men, is that just like a if you end up being that way, you skew more towards that side of the spectrum, especially when it comes to maybe trying to aspire to be like a Joe Rogan or an Elon Musk. Like you want to do it yourself and maybe get advice when it's necessary, but how do you how do you teach men? Like how do you work with, not specific like in business, but like raising a kid, like raising a son, raising, a hard-headed son, or like even if you're a man yourself and you're dealing with these challenges, you don't want to go talk to somebody, you want to go figure it out yourself. Like what can you give them so at least they're prepared for the journey and they don't experience more hardship or more heartbreak than they have to, if they're not going to listen and they're just going to do it their own way anyways.
It's funny because I think and can't say this has worked for me. I have a 18-year-old and he's very, very, very stubborn. He is going to do what he's going to do, and that's it. And what I find interesting is the idea that, first of all, when I was younger, I was much more of the female archetype. I was much more interested in relationship building and being pretty, and just those kinds of things. Being feminine, being the one sought after. That there's this kind of dynamic where there's the one who seeks and the one who gets sought after. All that kind of stuff. And as I got older, I got more into being more driven like a man. Like there were certain things I wanted to do in my career. There were things where I want to have my house and I want to have my car and I want to have my bank account and be independent and all of that kind of stuff. So I think we take on characteristics that are male and female. At least in my experience, that has been the case. And as I've gotten older, I think there's more of a blending of the two, um, in terms of being nurturing, but also being, wanting to have some power in the world. And I don't think there's anything wrong with power. I think the problem with male power now is that it's hard to define what is um, true, authentic power versus what is the power that feels authentic and actually does have power, but is actually coming from a very deep wounded place. So all I'm saying is that male power, when I looked at or I listened to the Rogan Musk interview, I felt like I was listening to two little boys expressing what it feels like or what it seemed like to be people of power, but actually was riddled with misconceptions, with not understanding stuff very well, not being very smart about things. And I'm sorry, I know a few things about the world. I think I'm older than both of them. I've been around a long time. I understand. I've been to a lot of schooling. I've got a law degree, all that kind of stuff. So, and I understand how a lot of things work. And it was like, how could I be listening to these two guys that get, so much attention on them that seem so lost in just basics? And that is a problem of our socialization and how we determine what's, properly male and female. So hopefully the way that I can answer your question is that what we can do is raise our children in a way that allows them to embody both the male and the female archetypal powers that are authentic to them. You might have a daughter, if you had another kid, you might have a daughter who is fierce and never going to listen to you, and I'm going to do whatever I want to do, and be very, very male-esque, in their drive and their motivations in life. And then she may turn 30 and become meet somebody and become very sweet and nurturing and want to stay home and jar peaches and have 10 kids. So I think that's part of what is very scary to a lot of people in society, that we do need to have both of those archetypes and express them. And men need to be okay with expressing their nurturing side, as well as truly understanding what is power. And I think that's my question to you. How do you define authentic personal power for yourself as a male? Or as just the full on Tyler entity on this planet?
Maybe some humility,
Why? Why have humility? Why is humility important for your power?
because without it, the powers will just hurt the people around you. Like, I love being, the guy that can go on the adventure, and I love, being the guy that obviously the wife, the guy that my wife is going to call when there's a spider in the house. Or yes, or a couple of days ago, my kids we got this. My wife got a snake for the kids. I didn't get the snake. I want to say, because she'll watch this and she'll kind of get that joke. We went to a snake convention because the kids might, they like snakes, and my wife has always been afraid of snakes, so she got a snake for the kids, just kind of impulsively, and it was a whole joke. But now we still have a snake. And the kids like to come in and kind of like play, and just look at it. But lately they've been having, the dexterity to kind of like pull the lock off of the cage. So they did that the other day, and I thought they put it back, but they didn't.
Uh-oh.
And so we woke up in the morning, the snake's gone. And my wife, kind of calls me panicked. I come running in from the office, and, the snake is just hiding in the room. So I just go pick it up and put it back. But, that's a nice feeling. It's a really small example of that masculine feeling. You come save the day. I love doing that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I love cooking. I love cooking a meal. I like homemaking. I love decorating. Someone might call it nesting, but, I love making the home feel cozy. And like, sometimes that's what it was very hard for me to have the humility to be like, hey, I like these things that are typically associated with, feminine traits. But
that's
if
power. There's power in feminine traits too.
But I don't think I understood that. And for me, I relate that back to, like, I can be as powerful as I want. I can go on as many adventures as I want and be as strong as I want. But like, if I don't have this other set of traits, it's going to cap somewhere. Like, I'm going to need that nurturing. I'm going to need that care. I'm going to need to slow down. I'm going to need that presence. I'm going to need the ability to listen. I'm going to need these, stereotypically more feminine traits if I actually want to embody my masculinity to the fullest extent.
Right. And same with femininity. That's the key. If you're going to be, if I'm going to be a strong feminine figure, I have to also embody some male traits, some male archetypal traits, and that's authentic power. And just to kind of get back to the original kind of where we started, if you do not recognize your own personal trauma and how it's affected you and how much trauma makes you feel unlovable, you are not going to be able to embody the authentic power that you want. And you will use a lot of things that look like power to try to protect yourself or to convince yourself that you're lovable. And it will never be enough because you're actually not addressing that feeling of unlovability. And part of being able to love yourself is the ability to look for where is your personal power, how you can express your love to the world by using the talents and powers that you have. And you can't put yourself in a box that's only male power or only female power. And I think we have to, as a society, accept male power as being okay for women to express. And we have to accept female power as being okay for men to express, because it's all power. And I think the way that we've been talking about power in an authentic way is about the capacity to show love by giving what we have.
You know what you said about like Joe Rogan and Elon Trump, and for that matter, like Andrew Tate and all these, male gurus on YouTube and everything. It's kind of just like it just made me think it's like it's the same thing as it's just not sexual. It's just like it's just mental. It's just mental porn. Like it's like the very concentrated best of the best things that are going to give you the most dopamine if you think about. I can have this money, I can have this power, I can have these girls. When in real life, like everybody knows it's fake, but like so is all this other stuff. The real thing is going to escape you if you're looking at just the very top thing that's going to give you that straight dopamine flood. It's not how it works in the real world.
Well, one thing I'll tell you this to kind of wrap it up, because as you reminded me of something my son said. So we were listening to the Rogan show with Elon Musk, and we got home and I said something about how, Tyler and I do this podcast every week, and we're different, different ages and different genders, and you vote for Trump and I'm the, liberal and all of that. And we do this podcast, and I think we're able to get really deeply into subjects. And he said, yeah, but nobody's going to watch you. And I said, why? And he said, because people do that, but the way that they do it is much more entertaining. And I said, well, tell me, how is it more entertaining? And he said, because they'll have two people like you and Tyler talking, but one of them will be saying, you're a fucking asshole and you're so wrong. And I hate all of these Mexicans, and then the other side will just, so it's overblown, over the top, arguments about different sides of a subject matter. And I said, you're right. Nobody's going to watch us unless we do that sort of thing. But what we're talking about is authentic. So you can get your dopamine fix because you watch somebody yell at somebody else, or talk shit about, an ethnic group or something, or someone's religion, but you're not going to actually get to the bottom of things. You're just going to get little dopamine hits. Oh yeah, that was a good comeback to that thing that person said. It's all that little boy thing. You're not getting anything. You're just being fed bullshit.
That I know we're kind of in two different places in parenthood, but my wife and I just had to cut out this really innocent seeming TV show because they're always just talking about butts. They're always making butt jokes and poop jokes. And I don't know, for the last week, my son's whole thing has been poop jokes. He calls me poop dad and he calls his mom poop mom, and he thinks it's the funniest thing ever. But there's no telling him it's not.
Yeah.
And I think part of that worries me, but at the same time, I think kind of looking at my own journey, with my parents and what they let me do, what they didn't, and clearly the wrong path that I was on, and something that I hope kind of being on the other end of just that male, what I call it kind of just male stupidity. It's just you like the butt jokes, the fart jokes, and I think all guys, maybe women too, but we all kind of have a period where we just think it's funny.
Yeah.
But having someone there to always hold up that mirror, that's not funny. It's just not funny. That's not the right thing. Those aren't where your values should be. For me, I didn't hear it for years and years and years and years and years. After I finally after I went on my adventure and found it out for myself, I was like, oh wow, that was right. And but then also kind of having like that home to come back to, or that like good example to come back to, like, oh, this is not foreign to me. I don't have to scrounge around and be like, I went to the end of the road and like, this is where it got me. It's like, oh, I went to the end of the road. Oh, and mom was right the whole time. And hopefully maybe that's what we can do with the content. I think maybe, no, we're not going to get millions and millions and billions of views because we're not doing that. But I do think there is an appetite for people having just real conversations, and just
I
like,
agree.
because once you see that that's a dead end, the only place to go is like, okay, well, what's not the dead end? What's the real thing? What's genuine? What's authentic?
Yeah. Yeah. And not funny after a certain point. It's just
So
dumb.
maybe to close us out. So what does someone do? Like, how do you become aware of where it crosses that line and you need to kind of scale back a little bit and recenter yourself?
Oh, I don't know. I think everybody has, that's part of the self-knowledge. Like, you'll know. I mean, it's if you spend time with yourself, you're going to know what that line is. Just like you're going to know what the line is where you put the boundaries with the family members that are, sapping your strength and energy. It's I think it's up to everybody to kind of sort through that. I mean, what do you think?
To hear you say that, it kind of makes, so you have to kind of go on that adventure.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
You just have to go through it and figure out where that line is for you.
Yeah, I don't think there's any shortcuts. And I think looking for the shortcuts is where people go wrong. But one thing I want to say, we were talking before about, we're not that kind of show. Like we're not going to be like screaming each other or putting each other down. But one thing I would like to do is I have this survey link, and I want people to click on the survey link. I'll put it in the description, that says what people want to hear. We want to have these kind of conversations that people really want to hear. So
Thank you guys for listening.
yeah, thanks for being here.
Even though we're not, giving you guys poop jokes and making racist comments.
I know. We're so bad at this.
Okay, but if I'm being honest, like sometimes I still have those jokes, just not on camera.
Me too. I do
so
too.
I still do that too.
I do.
And I still enjoy them.
It's just like, when is it appropriate, and when does it come up? It just doesn't come up in these conversations. Otherwise, I'd be doing my bad jokes too.
When you're running the government, maybe they should be kept to a bare minimum.
Thanks for tuning in. I want to point out that in the description, we have a short survey. We would love to hear from you. What are some of the topics you would like us to talk about? At Bounce Back Generation, we are here to address those really deep questions that you might have about trauma, how to deal with adversity and challenges in your life, and how to kind of get past those things so you can live the life that you want to live. It's more than just personal growth. It's really a deep understanding of who we are and how we get from here to where we